Hello. So this presentation is going to discuss my graph and I should say graphs, and basically the subject that I chose. And I'm struggling for words here because where I started and where I finished are two different things. I decided to kind of pivot away from the initial uh, labeling of things because I felt it was the title was a little bit extreme and could be maybe off-putting for sensitive people. So I ended up changing it up. So it basically has to do with mental health and, thinking harmful things for yourself and trying to navigate away from that and trying to find the positivity in life and figuring out what sort of data visualization might be available to help compile some sense of it. But basically, here is the consensus. So I ended up settling on something a little bit less extreme and focusing on the depression side of it. And I know this is really an assignment that has to do with data visualization, so I'll kind of step away from explaining the topic because I think we all know where we're going with that. So initially, I really only had these sections on the bottom, starting with this overview. And this was part of a previous attempt on the assignment, minus the visualization mode that was added later. But really, I felt that the data here was not relevant to what I was trying to look at. And for some reason, I was missing an entire section. So that was added this round in the final piece. But let's go over the data visualization in general and see what's going on here. So this whole thing, basically it's all uploaded to GitHub and they pull from CSV files. And I have to really thank AI for all contributions into recompiling all that data into the CSV files, because I would not have been able to do that, that's for sure. So, I mean, these are very basic. Python is a good resource for setting things up in a very clean way. It's designed for data interpretation anyway. So it definitely helps out that it's processed through Python and not another platform. But basically here we have all our descriptions, everything highlights, and different selections. So you can kind of toggle between the environments. And I didn't want it to be too wordy. So really you're just looking at the different elements like depression, academic overload, pretty self-explanatory, sleep and study satisfaction, pandemic conditions. I mean, the data may or may not be relevant, but basically the idea was to compare and contrast. And when you go to the different graphs, so we'll go to like academic workload and depression, you can see everything is set up in the axis. You have male versus female, it's color coded. If you want to change, like if you're colorblind, you can invert the colors. That was a feature added later on. Grayscale, this is really just for me to like make sure that the data still made sense even if the colors were taken away. Colorblind safe, it just swaps out the color scheme for one that to another one basically. Well, that is the funny thing is it's supposed to be colorblind safe, although if I remember correctly in the in one of the lectures. I think blue and yellow are actually not colorblind safe, so that is you'd almost be better off going with the standard or high contrast. I suppose you could do that, or the inverted color. It's the color blue that's an issue in all those options, but hey, it should still work. Color blindness does not necessarily mean color deficiency. It's okay. So all the data is here. The only thing that maybe might bother me is if I'm not familiar with what these are, it might take me a second to understand it. But otherwise, you go over and you can see like a percentage of depression and workload. It's just kind of generic ratings, and you can just make it female or you can just make it male, it doesn't matter. Add it back. So you got all those features, and then right at the bottom it even generates, this is AI generating based off of logic, but it even generates a little summary of what's going on here. And this is just to give another option. So you have options of graphs that show up in different forms just to see if it's understandable. So I would say the metrics is pretty clean. Whether the data is produces something is a different story, but that is not necessarily the point of the data visualization. The point is to get a message across. And I wanted to make sure that there were different options available just for the purposes of this assignment. So we have a heat map, and it shows the data from basically from like a study that was conducted. So you'd have to really go back and go over that study if you want to fully understand what's going on. But it basically has to do with sleep satisfaction. You can see on the other axes. The only thing I don't like about it is that the text is vertical rather than horizontal. I usually don't prefer that, but I was trying to be as automatic with the direction as possible rather than making it about like manually editing information in the metrics, because I feel like it makes the data graphs reusable. I mean, we don't always have the greatest amount of time in the world to redo. So you have that issue. The colors, I would say they work good. Maybe not for somebody who's colorblind, but you have options to switch out the colors. And as you can see, you don't have to be colorblind to necessarily see, but you can reinterpret the data in a different lens, however it might be best. See, I can't really describe what the PH9 score is, but basically you get the gist of what's going on here. And it has to do with basically a case study that was done and people's reports on how much average of sleep they got and how satisfied they were. And those averages were, the mean was factored into the equation. And granted, this data is kind of reinterpreted from the original, so it's not exact, and I don't want to like say, hey, these are the exact figures that came from the graph. I remember that a lot of the data had to be kind of re-altered in order to put it in this graph here for you guys to see, or whoever is. Okay. So yeah, we're going over the metrics. I don't want to keep on, but basically you have all different types of options to work with. This gives you, let me just refresh that page again. Because my screen recorder is a trial version, so it basically cut out on me and I had to go back in. Okay, so this is the original data that I had going on, and as you could see, there's a bunch of different points to scatter plot. The scatter plot can actually be expanded outwards. I'm not, everything's kind of freezing up on me a little bit, I apologize, but yeah, you have all different kinds of options to change out the different variables. That was the original intent, and this is actually from data that wasn't really complying very well. So, but I left it in anyway because there was just a lot of work and effort that went into making sure that this produced. And so basically, what's going on here? All right, so I apologize. This recording might be a little bit shakier than I was hoping for it to be, because I recorded literally like 20 minutes of a discussion and it disappeared on me. So I think just to summarize what was going on, because I really don't want to go through that process again, just to kind of redundantly go over everything. But I think we get the point across that, as far as visualization goes, all the different points, lines, and measurements are intact. The only thing to consider is the quality of the data itself might be at risk due to the fact that a lot of it was converted over from one source to another, and therefore the natural data source was lost in the process. And that was something that I was trying to mention earlier. But otherwise, the data itself is fine, and it more or less is pretty close to what it was before. There are just loads of options to work with, and some of the options, well, there are so many variables between them that it produces weird graphs. So that was something that I'm not keen on doing that in the future, because it drastically reduced the quality of the data, despite what the effort that the thing that I was trying to intend on having as a result. It didn't add up correctly. It didn't add up the way that I thought it was going to add up. Despite having all these parameters to work with, it just was not feasible for the option. But I left it in here because I still think it's pretty cool that it does that. I think the other thing that's cool about this is that all the accessibility options are intact. So that's kind of important for what we're doing. And otherwise, I would say I went over here. I was trying to mention that what I found, that the data that was available is not the final data that I think should belong with the data set. It was basically the only thing that was concluded from this data was that there are certain situations that people might go through that can result in a greater level of depression, which is really summarized here. So academic workload and things like stress and sleep can enhance the possibility of the manifestation of depression in an individual. And where the initial intent was to think of that in a more extreme light, I think it didn't really prove anything, but the data is still good, the process was still good, the result was not enough. So I went digging a little bit more, and I came across this case study, which basically I thought it was really interesting because it takes depression and it links it a little bit more, and I'm probably not wording this correctly, but depression levels are associated with reduced capacity to learn, to actively avoid adverse events in young adults. So basically what the implication here is, based on their data studies, is that when an individual's depression increases, their willpower to resist the elements in their life which might cause them to give up on their life decreases. They don't care as much. Their motivation is reduced, essentially. So that this would be like something I would look into further, and I think their data sources are a much more higher quality data. If I were to redo the process again, I definitely wouldn't do this, clump together every single bit of data source and have it lose its meaning in the process. Everything would just remain individually intact the way it originally was, and that probably would have produced a much better and cleaner result. Like this, the data is very organized, simple to understand. The colors are fine, the dots are fine, and you've got different lines. And granted, I know it's kind of complex information. You really have to study it more. These are based off of case studies, a BD1, a BDI-11. I'm not too familiar with how that process works, but it seems to have gotten them to conclude something which I feel is most likely agreeable. Something called active avoidance. So I do want to point out as a final thing while I wrap this up, that if you're somebody that, and I know I can't assume who the audience is always going to be, so I like to throw these little extra notes in here. If you're somebody who's going through something and you feel like your struggle is too much and it wears you down and you can't breathe, or you feel like you're drowning, life is worth that struggle. You just keep on fighting through it, and sometime in the future you will find a way out of it, if that way out of it doesn't find itself for you in the process. And everyone's grappling with something, everybody's struggling with something, and not all our struggles are equal. I get that, but what doesn't harm you severely can only make you stronger in other areas, and you can use that strength to teach other people like yourself who also are looking for a reason to keep going. You could teach them how you do it by just doing it yourself. There's strength in numbers, But life is definitely too short to fall into that trap. You keep on finding something else. You uh, outsmart the demons that cause you to be pushed down. I don't know how to describe it from my end, and that this is where maybe data visualization is hard to describe this, but I have to throw it in because it's a final step in something very important. Life is too short, and there's always somebody who's grappling with something more, who would give anything to be in our positions grappling with stuff. So, definitely don't take life for granted. The fact that we're here, it's like such a miracle. Even if you feel like something's missing in your life, things don't feel the same, or there's too many interferences, there's too much struggle. You got people yelling at you got people touching you, and some people are okay with it and some people are not okay with it, but you live with it until the situation resolves itself, and you just try. It's the only thing you can do until you find a solution, somebody finds a solution, the environment manifests a solution, or God's self comes down and makes a solution happen. You never really know. But if you're not here long enough to be around when that happens, then you might just miss out on it. You don't want to do that. You don't want to miss out on opportunities that could be in the future. You stay with your feet on the ground. You stay with your feet on the ground, and you just keep on going forward. Switch up your environment. There are all kinds of things that you can do to keep going, even when you don't feel like you want to do it. You still have to do it. I like to say that my struggle is worth every bit of it, even if it means for that 1 minute sometime in the future that's when you finally get what you're looking for. And sometimes it's just a matter of like really reassessing what you're looking for. There's all kinds of things that you can take into consideration to change your environment. It's all like mindfulness and reflection, like all these things that we learn when we go to like a college like Boston College that teaches you about mindfulness and things like that. Like it's very important. Finding purpose, doing something for others, being a person that thinks of others is in my opinion, is very rewarding to the self when you do those things for other people and you put them to maybe a slightly higher pedestal than yourself sometimes, because it changes people. It changes them, and you learn from it, and you use those interactions to improve your own life. Life is definitely strange, and we're here and we're living. And sometimes our experiences are not as fulfilling as we want them to be, and sometimes they're not fulfilling at all, but it is what it is. It's a blessing to be experiencing. When you think about all the possible life in all of existence where people are not experiencing anything, because they never had a shot at it. And sometimes we're sitting here complaining about our own experiences. I got some of my grades back recently, and one of them was not what I was hoping for. Not in this class, but in another class. It was very unsatisfactory. I did end up passing the class. That was the good thing. And if I hadn't passed the class, it's fine. I would have just retaken the class. It's just a class, but I work hard to make sure that I get good grades. And yeah, maybe I cut corners here or there, but that's just because I'm at the end of it and I'm kind of like trying to drag through the rest of a long journey. But I was thinking about that, and I'm like, there's a lot of people that lose their life over things like grades and failures. You go to school. I failed at a lot of stuff. It doesn't, you learn from it. You just try not to fail too badly. There's some failures you try to avoid, but getting bad grades and accumulating debt, they're all forgivable failures. And in my opinion, everything can find a way to be forgiven, but those are easily forgivable, and we don't forgive ourselves for it. And because our families put a lot of pressure, society puts a lot of pressure. But you need to put that aside. Don't worry about them. Don't worry about society. Just everyone does what they need to do to survive and thrive and overcome and win. And if things aren't working out for you the way that you had hoped, then disconnect yourself from whatever it is that's making you feel that way. They're not worth it. There are so many things that are free that don't cost anything. Going outside the sun or being strategic about it. You work with your money intelligently, so maybe you can have some things here or there, or you hide it on the side. Who cares? And if you're in a situation where you feel trapped, there's always something you can do to get out of it. Sometimes all it is just waiting it out until whatever the situation is gives up on being that situation. That happens too. And the college degree, what if I had come all this way just to not get a degree? I don't know. Because the way that education works changed so drastically that degrees don't matter anymore. They never did in the first place. Nothing matters. The only thing that matters is you're here to live, and it's beneficial if you find a place in society to be part of it, if you can. But if not, I think society is stable enough to keep us afloat. I know this was a long part of an assignment that has nothing to do with data visualization. Actually, no, that is not true at all. That had everything to do with data visualization, just not in the context that one might assume. But I'm sure if anyone was listening to what I was just saying right now, you would be visualizing data in your head. So therefore, it counts, it qualifies. And even if it doesn't, who cares? I think it's way more important. It's a way more important message. And if I get marked off for it, I get marked off for it. I know BC doesn't do that, but some schools might do that. And if they do, they do. I've got marked off for a lot of stuff. I've failed a lot of grades before. I do good now, but I didn't always do good. I didn't come from a place where I did good naturally from the start. I had to work, and I had to struggle, and I had to overcome to do that, and that's fine. But I also know that it is what it is, We're human, we're creatures. We're all different sorts of people and creatures trying to make sense of the environment that we live in. It doesn't have to be complicated, and sometimes we make it complicated. It doesn't have to be complicated. Life is for living, even if you feel like you're not living inside. Sometimes we feel that way too. But life is for living. There's always hope around the corner. And if you take that hope away, that's you taking that hope away. That's nobody else taking that hope away. Just be grateful that we're not living in a society where we're building pyramids and stuff the way that people used to in the past. Unless it was aliens. That could have been aliens too. I don't know. Well, go outside, switch it up before I start going off on another tangent. Have a good rest of your day.